this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. I felt compelled to sit down in the chair today and with you guys. I got to tell you, I have to talk about these latest developments with the so-called Gilgo beach murders. This is in the wake of this recent charging document that has come up. Let's have a brief moment here, and I'm going to rattle off some names to you. Rex Heuermann has been charged with the first-degree murder of Melissa Bartholomew, the first-degree murder of Megan Waterman, the first-degree murder of Amber Costello, and the second-degree murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Unfortunately, the list has grown. So, as of this recording, we must add the second-degree murder of Jessica Taylor and the second-degree murder of Sandra Castilla. We always have to remember the victims. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, this is a very sad day. It is a day where this ghoulish list has grown by 2 at this point in time. I can't speak for you, my friend, but I mean, I didn't know what to expect. I had a lot of people with media organizations reaching out to let me know that this was happening. This was days and days back. And of course, I've got a lot of friends that spend in the podcasting world that spend a tremendous amount of time on the Gilgo cases.
Well, good grief, Joe. This has been covered for years.
Yeah, we've
done it. We've done it here. You and I have both been on with other shows covering this case. There have been documentaries over the years. There have been so many different angles on this that when Rex Heuermann was arrested, he wasn't somebody that was in my line of fire in terms of what we had looked at previously. I mean, this case has been looked at from every angle, including police involvement in the murders. And I think back to the different programs where different people said different theories, and a lot of times people will get so invested in a theory that they present it as a fact. And you have to remind yourself they're no different than you and me. They're not in the investigation. They're merely looking on the outside in, and they think X, Y, Z. But we already had the Gilgo 4. Those were the first ones. And in reality, they were labeled the Gilgo 4, even though there were only 3 that he'd been charged with. The 4th one came later. But there was that presumption that he was that guy. But you and I both pointed out, there are more than just 4 bodies here. We're dealing with maybe more than one serial killer, for crying out loud. And one of the things that came up was Manorville. It's a bit of a drive away from Gilgo, and yet there was a connection there because torso of a victim was found at Manorville, other body parts found at Gilgo. And immediately it was, oh my goodness, Joe, are we dealing with more than one person working together to kill these people? I mean, what are we really dealing with?
Right.
And now looking at this new information from investigators, it actually helps tie a few things together, because I really wondered how, some things were fitting in. And as we look at this today, adding to the list of the original Gilgo 4, the two people that have been added, Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla. And Jessica Taylor was that person that ties Rex Heuermann to Manorville,
yes,
and Gilgo. So now we have that connection. It's not two separate people. This person, Rex Heuermann, boy, I know he's a human being.
I know where you're going. I know where you're going. I know
what he has done.
I know. It's hard to take the measure of it.
You've seen so many things over the years, Joe.
Yeah.
And I'm having to think that if you were to walk in this person's basement and realize this is a torture / death chamber, it would still give you the heebie-jeebies, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, if I had the knowledge of what had gone on, it's weird. When you're an investigator, I think there's part of you tries to galvanize your mind against, your humanity, if you will. I know that sounds very, but that's one of the things you have to do to function in that environment. And we've got police officers and investigators that have made multiple trips out there. And isn't that a fascinating thing to consider, knowing what they know? Because as you well stated just a few moments ago, there is nobody, and I mean nobody, that's outside of this investigative bubble that knows everything. And we should not know everything, because right now we are in the midst of a game of chess, if you will. And we're spectators, all right? And that really needs to seep down into everybody's brain here. We are merely spectators of what's kind of transpiring before us. You've got prosecutors from the county, and then you have Heuermann's defense team. Now, in light of what the state released yesterday with this document, and Dave, I got to tell you, brother, I don't remember a document like this in recent memory that details with such a graphic nature of kind of what was going on behind the eyes, allegedly, with this person, the accused. It's a matter of trying to understand this analytically without getting caught up in the emotion of it if you're an investigator or prosecutor, moving forward point by point. And there are a lot of points here, because the data alone, just from a forensic standpoint, Dave, is so dense. All of these various considerations, everything from electronic forensics to certainly all of the biological elements of evidence being collected. We've got hair. I don't know that we have blood. And then we have all of the medical legal considerations as well with these bodies who, let's face it, they've been severely abused, allegedly abused before death in the antemortem state, but oh my gosh, certainly abused and desecrated in the postmortem state. So you've got all of those factors working in, and we haven't even talked about the actual, circumstantial stuff that's out there and the investigative, the shoe leather kind of stuff where you're going and knocking on doors and interviewing people. This is merely, which is where we kind of dance, this is merely the forensic stuff. And this stuff is so dense. And for every case that is added, those are more data points along the way, and it begins to increase exponentially.
I thought it was fascinating when they referred to some of the documentation that we're going to get into as a blueprint for a serial killer or blueprint for murder, because we are dealing with a person who is an architect by trade and training. And the way that he allegedly went about his business of killing and note-taking, and it's not happenstance, it's pre-planned, pre-thought out, and beyond. And in these notes, Rex Heuermann allegedly acknowledges next time. That's frightening, Joe, for the man to make notes and say next time, which means he had no plan on stopping. And I'm very curious if Rex Heuermann, between the years that he stopped, that Gilgo stopped collecting people, dead bodies, if Rex Heuermann found another dump site and continued, are we going to find another area that Rex Heuermann, because I just don't see him stopping. All of a sudden, out of the thin air 10 years ago, he just decides, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I don't. It would be very hard to convince myself of that. And let's take this from another perspective. He's obviously targeting women that are living on the fringes. Many of them are associated with escort services,
the sex trade.
And, yeah, exactly. And in my kind of southern rural mind, it's very difficult. It was difficult for me to appreciate how vast this population that he could select from is. When you fly into New York, you've never been to New York. There's population density, and then there's population density. You begin to see how vast this area is and how many people occupy this very small space. And it is a predator's playground. And isn't that interesting? Because in the document that we're going to talk about, the word hunting is used, I believe, and he uses the term playtime. And these are some of the most ghastly things that any human being could participate in. If what we're hearing and is being alleged by the prosecutor here is accurate. And one more thing, in all honesty, I had never been to Long Island in my life. I'd always heard about it. I have many friends that are from Long Island. And this past April, I had the opportunity to be a guest and speak at the Hamptons, what's referred to as the Hamptons Whodunit. It's a true crime thing that takes place up on Long Island. And they generously flew Kim and I in, and we got to spend the weekend there talking about cases. But while I was there, we were taken to not only Gilgo Beach, because you have to drive right by it, en route to East Hampton.
Did you know that ahead of time? Or was that kind of, hey, we're on the way and this is where they're talking about?
No, my buddy that was taking us up there, he said, and my buddy that did this is that was so kind to chauffeur Kim and I from LaGuardia all the way up there, which it's about a 2.5 hour drive.
Oh, okay. We're not talking about something that's just down the street next to the Dixie Mart.
This is robust.
Okay.
I mean, the miles and the time. The time is a big thing up there.
So he was telling you ahead of time, hey, we're going to drive right by here.
Yeah. And my buddy is a retired NYPD cold case investigator.
Wow.
And so not only did he take us to Gilgo, Dave, but he also took us to Heuermann's home. And
Did you do a trick or treat?
No, I was not. And it was kind of chilling because the place itself, when you're outside of it, you understand that it's a dump. And it's a
compared
dump
to the surrounding homes, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And these are not mansions. Okay.
Right.
But they're very, very expensive because it's Long Island
Yeah.
and you're more proximal to the city than you are, say, out toward Montauk and all of that area. When you begin to consider this neighborhood, this little town where this family hangs their hat, and there was a car in the driveway, all these sorts of things. So this predates by a month or so this new visitation that we bore witness to on the news, where the police came back. And, we got video and we got images, outside of the home. And it's one thing to sit behind the mic and kind of pontificate about cases and places you've never been. I think a lot about Idaho, for instance. And I think about a lot of these cases that we comment on. But when you're there and you kind of put on your investigator's hat just for a moment and you begin to appreciate spatial relationships, linear distances, between the dump site and the home, it puts it in a whole new perspective. And Dave, I got to tell you, the fact that what we believe we know now went on in this neat kind of Leave It to Beaver neighborhood, is the thing of nightmares.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
There have been many times throughout my life, and I think a lot of it has to do with my kind of cracked lens that I view the world through as a result of the job that I did for so many years. I don't necessarily see nice things everywhere I go. I always think about what darkness is held behind certain walls. You know, you go through a neighborhood and maybe it evokes some memory that I have of cases that I've worked that appear very similar. And you know that there's darkness in certain locations. And I'm not a big fan of the word haunted. However, I think that there is kind of a presence of evil sometimes, maybe haunted, of locations. And it's not necessarily that the location is haunted. It's the individuals that occupy that space. And Dave, when I think about this house that the Heuermann family lived and lives in, and what secrets are there, and then I couple that with this wildly beautiful shoreline that they have, because it's different than what we have down here along the Gulf, but it's windswept. It's not too different in my estimation from, and you described this in great detail to me, the area that you occupied, that you would go to as a younger man, with the Outer Banks. Mm-hmm. It's kind of got that feel to it, you know.
We have an area between the ocean and there's islands and things that run parallel, where you end up having an area that's brackish water called a sound, and then you have the ocean, and that's what we have here in a lot of marshy areas where there's a lot of brackish water to contend with, and the area where the bodies were found at Gilgo. Now, I'm fascinated that when you were headed to the whodunit, that it did right by here, and oftentimes when we think about, boy, I hate calling it a dump site, Joe. That just is so diminishes.
No. That's vernacular. You go ahead and run with that. There's no shame in that.
Area where, I believe more than one person has used this area. Only my mind can't wrap it around one person doing all the damage and creating all the carnage. But you drove by it, and I'm thinking, as you were riding by, and people drive by this area every day and don't know this is where something horrific happened to another human being. They were already dead when they got here, and this person dumped them here, just hiding them to get away with it. And yet I wonder how many times we drive by something every day where something horrific took place in that space. And I think about the families, and I think about those who have loved ones that have been missing, and they wonder where they are, and they've been here all that time. And I wonder, what it's like for people who knew somebody that they found part of her in one area, but not all of her body parts. And then they find another part years later in a different area. I'm thinking, what kind of person does that?
It's and that's very difficult to take the measure of it, I think. And here's the thing: a lot of these locations, or what I saw, particularly with the Gilgo area, is that when you're kind of cruising along this stretch of roadway, and it's a 4-lane, so you have a median. And then you have 2 lanes that are closer to the beach. And then you have the other 2 that are on kind of the marshy, swampy sound side, if you will. And it varies. The topography will change periodically. Dave, the thing about it is that there's no cover really, to conceal yourself. And here's another interesting point that every local up there had told me. We, in our recent trip up there, we arrived in April. It's still cold. I mean, Kim and I were walking around with like sweaters on and, light jackets and that sort of thing. It's chilly, brother. And they said, we're like 2 weeks away from the first onslaught of tourists that show up in this location. Now, these arteries up there, if you will, the roadways, they talk about them getting clogged. It takes hours and hours sometimes to get to specific destinations. And here's kind of, do you know that several of these cases that the police are putting forward from an investigative standpoint, and again, these are only approximations, some of these would have occurred during the height of the vacation season up there. You look at Bartholomew, where the police are putting out a number of June 10th, 2009. Well, that's people on vacation. Megan Waterman, June 6th, 2010. September 2nd for Amber Costello. That's pre-Labor Day, brother. And so you're still going to have people around that area. Oh, let's don't forget Maureen Brainerd Barnes. That's in the heart of summer. That's July 9th. So how bold do you have to be, I think, is a grand question here. How sure of yourself and sophisticated are you as a perpetrator that you would be willing to venture out? Because there's no cover. Like when if you're in a truck like he's driving, and you pull this thing over on the side of the road, people are going to notice you.
Right.
Because they have the same kind of, and I think that probably it has changed over the years. It's not necessarily the same as it used to be. This is a very tight space, though. You have to be so familiar with it, and you have to be able to time traffic as well. And when you drive this route, which we were able to drive, that my buddy thinks may have been the route that he took, it's kind of a gigantic
Okay,
loop.
when you say his route from his house to Gilgo?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
You don't think he took a boat?
Well, he would not have had to, particularly when it comes to the Gilgo 4, because he would have immediate access, on the shoulder of the road. But again, it's a big risk, I think.
That's why there's been some suggestion that maybe he hopped in a boat and went there at night.
Yeah, no, and looking out over that sound, I'm not saying, I'm familiar with the waterways down in South Louisiana near my family's home down there, homes, and that's treacherous at night because if you don't know the marshes, if you don't know that, you're going to get beached somewhere. You're going to run aground. You have to think about, well, where are you going to launch from? Right. And then are you skilled enough to make your way through these areas? And I think
everything
that, again,
looks so different at night on the water.
It does.
During the day, you kind of see markers. It's difficult to judge distance during the day when you're on the water.
It
is.
At
night, I can't imagine, because I was always told, unless there's an emergency, you have no business going out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you as really a recreational person,
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I was looking at this. I'm just kind of curious. I didn't realize that you were right there. I missed that conversation previous. So it's
kind of a weird space because you've got this kind of gridded off. If you go to the north of the Sound, it's laid out very logically from town to town. You've got, for lack of a better term, and directions are not absolute, but when you think about kind of north-south avenues and east-west streets, if you want to organize it in your brain like that, there's grids up there. When you get down near the beach, you kind of follow the rattle and hum of what the shore is dictating, right? And you'll come across bridges, you'll come across locations where the road just comes to an end.
Right.
And so you have to know the space, and how much more so when you have the added this added factor of transporting not just deceased individuals, but dismembered individuals. And you're thinking, and when you look at this document that the police have put forward regarding these new charges, Dave, you begin to think about Heuermann has obviously gone to great pains. He's very analytical, relative to this. And like you said, he's by trade, let's face it, he's an architect, but he has that engineering mindset that everything has a very, it's very ordered. And he knew, it would seem, that the slightest little mistake that he could make would get him caught. The only thing is that he started butchering these women in a time before our DNA technology became as robust as it is now. You see, he maybe didn't count on the fact that he wasn't going to be fighting or resisting the blue lights that might pull him over. You see, his downfall potentially could be in the hands of those that wear white lab coats and that sit inside of forensic laboratories.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Heuermann made this appearance in court, and oh my gosh, the document that came along with this thing, I started reading through it, and I didn't know if you had it, because I'm sure you're spinning up stuff for Nancy and all these other things that you're involved in. I was thinking, I got to get this in his hand. And so that's why, I shot this document off to you at that particular time.
Well, Joe, it answered one of the most, we've had the Gilgo 4 since the very beginning, and they were labeled the Gilgo 4, even though Heuermann was only charged at the time with 3 murders.
Yeah.
It was the 4th one was added later. But we, as people who have reported on this particular crime, plural, we have wondered, when are we going to tie some of this together? Because there was, in fact, a woman who got added to this yesterday. And or recently. I mean, the investigators have had this for a long time. But what they put forward in the warrant, arrest warrant, lays out everything they have that they're willing to share, that they have to share, because a judge has to determine, do they have enough to move forward with this case and what they're planning on doing. And when you get to the disappearance of Jessica Taylor and the recovery of her remains, you find out that she is the tie between Manorville and Gilgo. When the police filed this document yesterday, they knew full on what was going to happen, that this is going to be a headline for a while now. We knew there was different dump sites along the way, body parts and things found, but Jessica Taylor being tied directly to Rex Heuermann, and Joe, I'm very curious about what has actually physically tied him. I'm not talking cell phones. I'm not talking about GPS locations. I'm talking about biological evidence tying Rex Heuermann to Jessica Taylor, because we have part of her found in one location and part of her found in another, separated by many years. I'm thinking about the compounded grief on her family, Joe, when they find out that she's gone from missing to dead, and then years later, they find out the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. Yeah. I just think of how her family had to have just been crushed.
Yeah, and you're talking about somebody that has greatly objectified, and people throw that term around, when it comes to, scantily clad women and,
right.
Sexual things like that. Save it. This is true objectification here. You're talking about somebody that has the ability to dehumanize a fellow human to the point where they refer to them as things to be played with. That's probably the most disgusting element of this. And there's so much to choose from here. But as you know, you had mentioned Jessica Taylor. You begin to think about connectivity, which we're always looking for in investigations. I think that probably with her, it's going to be biological sample relative to hair, Dave, that's going to tie her back. And the beauty of hair is that obviously it's a bit more difficult to tease out DNA from it.
Is that because the hair in and of itself is not, if it doesn't have the root,
yes,
it doesn't have what you need, correct?
Yeah, and a lot of, I think, we talk about this quite a bit, but, we shed hair every day. We're, all of us do. You're going to lose hair. And so you're going to leave behind the strands, but yeah, you're going to look at something, like possibly mitochondrial DNA if you've got a broken hair shaft. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the hair shaft has been, or the hair has been broken off so that it's like in an event where it's being pulled out. Right. Being pulled out, you might have a better chance of finding a root, which you can get nuclear DNA out of. And just to make it very simple, the shaft hair, the fractured shaft, is a bit more difficult to tease it out, but it's certainly better than nothing, right? Right. And when you have a specific identifier that you can tie back. So these hairs, and it's pretty obvious to me that they're focusing at a microscopic level on collection of hair and fiber evidence in this case, because it's one of the things that they're going to have to fall back on. It's quite powerful because you get an insight, Dave, into the investigation itself.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah,
Joe,
please.
I hate to interrupt, but
No.
Okay. With Jessica, let's just take Jessica Taylor for a minute. She was one of two new victims that has been attributed to Rex Heuermann. We're talking about her torso found on July 26, 2003 in Manorville. She actually found on Halsey Manor Road in Manorville. I looked this up earlier because I wanted to see on a map the distance between Manorville and Gilgo. And you're talking about 45 miles between Manorville, where Jessica Taylor's torso is found, and Gilgo, where her skull, hands, and forearm are discovered. Now, there was 9 years, or 8 years between the discovery of her torso in Manorville in 2003 and her skull, hands found at Gilgo in 2011. Joe, the obvious. She was decapitated, her arms severed below the elbows, and there was a tattoo on her torso that was obliterated with a sharp object, is what it says. Yeah. And these are all ways of preventing her identification, correct?
Yeah, it is. And you can look at this in a couple of different ways. So you can look at it in the long term, and you can look at it in the short term. The excision, if you will, of a tattoo from an individual's body is a short-term answer to trying to prevent someone from being identified. You look at it from, we're going to immediately remove this item that's in soft tissue. He has to have an understanding of the degrading of human remains and kind of at least an elemental understanding of decomposition. So if you make an effort to take an edged instrument and literally carve out this piece of flesh, which is what you're going to have to do because the tattoos will go down to the dermal level in the body, all right, where this this ink is being, essentially placed into the skin.
Hey, Joe, assume I missed those days in biology class. How deep is the dermal level?
Well, you can go down probably, you can be within the dermis before you get to the subcu fat. And he's not going to have a sense of that. And when I say, just think of a layer. So you've got the epidermis, which is that top layer where you get sunburn, skin peels. That's your epidermis. Okay. Dry skin, epidermis.
Okay.
All right. And then you have the dermis, which is below that level. So the epidermis acts as almost like a protective shield over the dermis. Then you go down below the dermis and you get into what's called subcu fat. Matter of fact, subcu fat, when they say we're going to give you a subcu injection, in a medical sense, that means that they're not going into a vessel. They're going into your subcu fat into, if you're getting inoculated, they're going into your subcu fat with that needle. All right. So they're not seeking out a vessel. So that subcu fat, if you don't, somebody that's in my line of work that has worked in the morgue, it would be very easy for us to accomplish these tasks. We have to accomplish them when we're looking for particular types of evidence, when we're doing a dissection in the morgue. I don't know that he has that level of skill. So there's a chance that he could have gone down into the subcu fat and essentially removed that plug of tissue. And again, we don't really know the dimensions of the tattoo. I think that's important to try to understand. But here's the other thing that's very interesting about this. When they annotated this, when the exam was being conducted, there would still have to be enough soft tissue for the forensic pathologist to say, oh, this is not as a result of decomposition. This is as a result of an excision. Okay, you're not talking about skeletonized remains at this point, because in order to assess that, you can't assess that on bone, Dave. So you have to look at soft tissue. If you've got a chunk of missing tissue, that gives you an indication that the individual is trying to do something. And I've had cases, Dave, where people have clipped off fingertips, knocked teeth out. All of these other, kind of very superficial things, that are typically done. But what does this really say? Oh, what it says is that, first off, he would have to have tools, and he's going to have a place to do this. And that brings us back to his house.
Well, now we've got Rex Heuermann linked to two more people. And there will probably be others, because mentioning before, Joe, Gilgo Beach doesn't end with 4, and we just proved that again with Jessica Taylor, and I wonder how many more.
I don't know. That remains to be seen. But when the final toll is taken here, I think it's going to be potentially a number that is going to be quite shocking. We'll see how far this goes and how deep they're going to go down this rabbit hole with Heuermann, and how many more victims they can link to him from an investigative perspective. We'll see what their evidence is like. How robust is it? Are they going to be able to have biological tiebacks, which of course is going to be the key here. But we will continue to watch the developments out of Long Island. There will be more. And we have to remember these women whose lives were just torn to shreds, and their families as well. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
Aldous Hodge returns as Alex Cross, your favorite detective on television, for Season 2 of the hit show Cross, premiering February 11th exclusively on Prime Video. Critics called Season 1 one of the year's best shows, with over 40 million viewers worldwide. And on February 11th, the story continues with a new season. From creator Ben Watkins and based upon characters created by James Patterson, Cross is Washington, D.C.'s most brilliant homicide detective and forensic psychologist. Fresh off his capture of the infamous serial killer The Fanboy, Cross teams up with the FBI to hunt down a vigilante serial killer targeting corrupt billionaires. As the case unfolds, Cross navigates a moral crossroads where the lines between justice and vengeance are blurred. Cross is back and better than ever. This season, get ready for a new case, higher stakes, but the same Cross. Watch Season 2 of Cross. New episodes weekly starting February 11th, only on Prime Video.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.